Emma Clark's life had become predictable. The kind of quiet routine that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty inside. She was 34, married for 8 years to Daniel, a respected architect in Portland. They had a charming house with a white fence, 2 cars, and polite smiles for neighbors. Yet behind closed doors, there was distance. The kind that grew so slowly. Neither of them noticed when it began. Every morning, Daniel left before sunrise, his coffee still warm on the counter. Every night, he returned, tired, his mind full of deadlines. Emma would ask about his day. He'd nod and mumble something about work. Then they'd eat in silence, watching television more out of habit than interest. They weren't unhappy exactly, just disconnected. Like 2 people standing side by side, staring at different horizons. One Friday evening, Emma's best friend Lauren called her. "You need to get out," Lauren insisted. "There's a charity art exhibit downtown tonight. Music, people, wine. You'll love it." "I don't know," Emma said, glancing at her half-finished dinner. "I don't feel like dressing up." "That's exactly why you should come. You've been living like a ghost." Lauren always had a way of getting through to her. So Emma sighed, changed into a simple navy dress, and drove downtown. That the art gallery was filled with soft jazz and polite laughter. Candles flickered along white walls painted with color and emotion. Emma wandered alone, wineglass in hand, pretending to study the paintings. She felt out of place until she heard a quiet voice behind her. "You look like someone trying to understand more than the art." She turned and saw a man standing beside her. He was in his late 30s, dressed simply but neatly, with thoughtful eyes that seemed to look right through her. His name was Ethan. "I guess I am," she said. Smiling nervously, he nodded toward the painting in front of them. A stormy ocean under a golden sky. The artist said it's about conflict and hope. "I think it's about holding on when everything's falling apart." His words caught her off guard. "That's a beautiful way to put it." They talked for nearly an hour, moving from art to books to the little things in life that most people overlooked. For the first time in months, Emma felt seen. Not as a wife or someone's +1, just as herself, when she finally said she should go. Ethan handed her a small business card. "If you ever want to see how I capture stories, come by my studio." She hesitated, then took it. "Maybe I will." That night, back home, Daniel was already asleep. Emma placed Ethan's card on her nightstand, told herself it was nothing, and turned off the light. But she couldn't sleep. The next morning, Daniel left for another business trip. As his car disappeared down the street, Emma stared at her coffee, thinking about the studio. Her mind argued against it, but curiosity whispered louder. By noon, she was driving across town, her heart beating faster with every mile. Ethan's studio was tucked inside a renovated warehouse filled with natural light. The walls were covered with photographs, faces of strangers, moments frozen in time. Emma stood in awe. Each picture seemed to hold a story. Raw and real. Ethan appeared from behind a curtain, smiling. "You came," he said softly. "I was nearby," she lied, though they both knew she wasn't. He showed her around portraits of elderly couples, street performers, children running through rain. "Every photo," he said, "is a memory someone let me keep." Something about his words stirred her heart. They sat down, talked again about creativity, dreams, fears. Time slipped by, unnoticed. When she finally left, evening light poured through the windows, and for the first time in years, she felt alive that night when Daniel called to check in. She smiled faintly at his voice. "How's the trip?" she asked. "Busy?" he said. "You know how it is." "Yes," she replied quietly, staring at her reflection in the window. "I know." The next few days were filled with thoughts she didn't want to admit. She told herself it wasn't wrong to have a friend, yet part of her knew the line was dangerously close. She promised herself she wouldn't see Ethan again, but promises made to ourselves are often the easiest to break. A week later, Lauren invited her to a dinner party. "You'll love the people," she said. "Normal, funny, no pressure." Emma agreed, hoping for distraction. The house buzzed with laughter, candles, and soft music. Then she met Ryan. He was the opposite of Ethan, loud, confident, and magnetic. A financial consultant, charming in the effortless way that made everyone lean closer when he spoke. He noticed Emma immediately. "You don't seem like you belong here," he said with a grin. "Why's that?" she asked, amused. "Because you're the only one not pretending to be impressed." She laughed, and it felt good, carefree and easy. Ryan had a way of pulling her into his world, full of jokes and energy. They talked, danced, and for a moment, she forgot about everything else. Driving home, she couldn't stop thinking about the two men. Ethan made her feel understood. Ryan made her feel desired. And somewhere between those two feelings was a truth she didn't want to face. She was lonely that night. Daniel texted her a photo from his hotel, a conference room, neat and cold. "Long day. Miss you." She stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Miss you too," but she didn't feel it. Over the next few weeks, her life began to split in two. Mornings were quiet, laundry, emails, silence. Afternoons brought messages from Ethan, who sent photos of sunrises and city streets. Evenings sometimes brought calls from Ryan, full of teasing and energy. Each man showed her something she'd lost in herself. Ethan reminded her of depth and purpose. Ryan reminded her of youth and laughter. She didn't intend for any of it to happen, it just did. One day, while Daniel was away again, Ethan invited her to join him at a local art fair. She almost said no, but agreed. They walked among the stalls, talking about color and light, but beneath the surface. Emotion lingered. At one point, Ethan stopped and looked at her seriously. "Emma, I don't want to make your life complicated, but I also don't want to pretend there's nothing here." She felt her breath catch. "Ethan." He shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." Later that night, Ryan called, his voice light and teasing as always. "You've been quiet lately. Did someone steal your smile?" Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe I misplaced it." "Well," Ryan said, "I plan on finding it." When she hung up, her chest ached. How had her life become this? Two men offering her what her marriage had lost? She still loved Daniel, or at least the idea of him. But they had become strangers who shared a house. One evening, she found Daniel's wedding photo tucked between old albums. They looked happy, hopeful. She touched the picture and whispered, "Where did we go?" She didn't have an answer. The next day, Daniel returned home early from his trip. He seemed tired, distracted, but when he hugged her, it felt different, heavier. "We need to talk," he said softly. Emma froze. For a second, she feared he knew everything. But instead, he said, "I think we've been drifting apart, and I don't want to lose you." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded, but guilt gnawed at her heart. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, torn between past and present. Comfort and passion, truth and deception. The next morning, she decided she needed to make a choice, not between Ethan or Ryan, but between who she was and who she was becoming. She didn't know yet that the truth about both men would soon shatter everything she believed about loyalty, love, and herself. Because sometimes the real shock isn't what others hide from us, it's what we discover about our own hearts when we finally stop pretending. The following week felt heavy for Emma. Every morning she tried to fill her time with errands, chores, and meaningless routines, but her mind refused to stay quiet. Ethan's calm eyes, Ryan's laughter, and Daniel's tired face all played in her head like fragments of different lives. She was somehow living at once. She had always thought of herself as a loyal person, steady, grounded. But now she couldn't recognize the woman she was becoming. It wasn't that she wanted to betray anyone. It was that she was trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. One rainy afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Would you come by the studio? I need a second opinion on a project." She stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Okay." The rain fell in soft sheets as she drove to his studio. Inside, it smelled of coffee and old wood. He was editing photos on his computer, portraits of different people, each one raw with emotion. "You capture people so honestly," she said, looking at the screen. "I try to," he replied, glancing at her. I think honesty is rare these days. His tone was calm but meaningful. She felt the weight behind his words. There was silence between them, not uncomfortable, but full of everything neither dared to say. Ethan finally sighed. Emma, I told myself I'd stay away, but I can't ignore what I feel. I don't want to complicate your life, but I can't pretend either. Her heart pounded. She didn't move closer, but she didn't step back. Ethan, this isn't simple, she whispered. I'm married. I know, he said softly. That's why I've done nothing but feel. For a long moment, they stood still, the space between them charged with emotion, yet untouched by action. Then Emma took a slow breath. I think I should go. He nodded. I understand. As she stepped outside, the cool rain felt almost cleansing. She sat in her car for several minutes before starting the engine. She didn't know if she was running from temptation or from herself. The next few days passed quietly. Daniel seemed more attentive since their talk, trying to reconnect. He asked about her day, cooked dinner once, even suggested a weekend away. It was the first time in years he'd mentioned time alone. Maybe we can drive up to Cannon Beach, he said, like we used to. She smiled faintly. That sounds nice. Still inside, she couldn't stop thinking about the two men, Ethan's depth and Ryan's charm. She hadn't heard from Ryan in a while, which made her oddly restless. Then, out of nowhere, he called. Hey, stranger, he said, his voice cheerful as ever. Did you forget me? I've just been busy, she replied. Busy pretending everything's fine? He teased lightly. She didn't answer. He chuckled softly. I'm having a small get-together this weekend. Nothing wild, just food, laughter, people. You should come. She hesitated. Ryan, I don't think Emma. He said gently, you need to stop thinking and start living. Something about his words struck her. She agreed, telling herself it was harmless. Just another party. When Saturday came, Daniel had left early for a client meeting, and the silence in the house felt suffocating. Without overthinking, she dressed simply and drove to Ryan's downtown apartment. It was a modern place with glass walls overlooking the city. Music played softly in the background, and a few people stood around with drinks. Ryan spotted her instantly. You came, he said with that easy grin. I said I would, she replied. He handed her a glass of sparkling water and led her to the balcony. The view was stunning. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars. You look like you belong up here, he said. She smiled, trying not to blush. You always say things like that, because they're true. We talked about everything, travel, work, dreams. But under his charm, Emma sensed something else, a quiet sadness. The kind people hide behind laughter. At one point he said, you know what I like about you? You don't try too hard. Most people do. Maybe I just stopped trying a long time ago, she replied softly. He looked at her carefully, his tone changing. You don't have to stay stuck, Emma. Life's too short to live half awake. His words lingered in her mind long after she left. When she returned home that night, Daniel was already asleep. She watched him for a moment, feeling both love and distance, a painful mix of what used to be and what could never be again. Days turned into weeks. Emma found herself torn between three worlds: the quiet comfort of her marriage, the emotional depth of Ethan, and the thrilling unpredictability of Ryan. It wasn't about choosing between men anymore. It was about choosing who she wanted to be. One afternoon she stopped by a cafe to clear her head. To her surprise, she saw Ethan there, but he wasn't alone. Across the table sat a woman laughing warmly with him. They looked close, comfortable. Emma froze. She didn't mean to stare, but it hurt. She quickly turned away and left before he could notice. That evening, Ethan called. I saw you today, he said. She tried to sound casual. I was just passing by. You left before I could explain, he said softly. That woman? She's my sister. Emma felt relief and embarrassment mixed together. I'm sorry, she said. It's okay, he replied. Maybe it's good you saw me. It reminded me how easily we misunderstand what we don't talk about. His words made her quiet. Maybe we shouldn't talk for a while, she said after a pause. There was silence on the line. Then a gento, if that's what you need. She hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. A few days later, Ryan texted again. "You've been quiet. Don't disappear on me." She hesitated before replying. "Maybe I need to figure things out," he answered. "Then start by not running from yourself." His message stirred something in her, not romantic excitement this time, but a strange curiosity. Who was she when no one else defined her? That night, Daniel brought home takeout. He seemed tired, but he smiled. "I booked that weekend trip," he said. "Just you and me." She looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who had once been her best friend, her safe place. Maybe it wasn't too late to find their way back. The next weekend, they drove to the coast. The sea was calm, the wind soft. They walked barefoot on the sand, talking about old memories, their first apartment, their silly arguments, their forgotten dreams. For a while, it felt almost like before. Daniel took her hand and said quietly, "I know I've been distant. I thought providing was enough, but I forgot how to love you the way you needed." Tears filled her eyes. "We both forgot," she said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe we can remember together." That night, they sat by the fire, wrapped in quiet peace. Emma realized that love wasn't always about excitement or new faces. Sometimes it was about choosing the same person again, even after you've lost your way. But life has a way of testing us. Just when we think we've found balance, when they returned home Sunday night, Emma's phone buzzed, a message from Ryan. "Need to tell you something. It's important." She hesitated, then replied, "Can it wait?" He responded, "No, it's about Ethan." Her heart skipped. What could Ryan possibly know about Ethan? She called immediately. Ryan's voice was serious. "You deserve to know the truth. Ethan isn't who you think he is. He's been working with my firm, a freelance photographer for one of our marketing projects. And he knew who you were before you met." Emma froze. "What do you mean?" "He saw your husband's company listed in our client files. He knew you were Daniel Clark's wife. He never told you because he thought it would ruin things." Emma's world tilted. "That can't be true," she whispered. "I wish it wasn't," Ryan said softly. "But it is." She hung up and sat in silence. Her chest ached, not with anger, but with disbelief. The man who had made her feel seen had seen her only through someone else's story. The next morning, Sri drove straight to Ethan's studio. When he opened the door, she didn't waste words. "You knew who I was before we met." He looked down, ashamed. "I did. I was going to tell you. But then I met you, and it stopped being about your husband. It became about you." "That doesn't make it right," she said, tears in her voice. "You took my trust and turned it into a secret." He stepped closer, his expression full of regret. "Emma, I never meant to hurt you." But she shook her head. "You already did." She walked away, her heart heavy but clear for the first time. That evening, Daniel found her on the porch, staring at the sunset. "You okay?" he asked gently. "No," she said honestly. "But maybe I will be." She leaned on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Not because life was simple, but because she had finally stopped running from herself. For days after confronting Ethan, Emma felt empty. It was as if something inside her had quietly collapsed. She went about her routine, cooking breakfast, answering emails, folding laundry, but everything felt like a play she was pretending to be part of. Her heart was tired. Her thoughts circled the same questions over and over. Why did she let it all happen? Why had she searched for meaning in the wrong places? Daniel tried to be patient. He could sense she was struggling, but he didn't push. Instead, he stayed gentle, small gestures like brewing her favorite tea, turning off his phone at dinner and listening when she spoke. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. One morning, while driving to the grocery store, Emma passed the art gallery where she'd first met Ethan. She slowed down but didn't stop. The sight of the glass windows reminded her of how everything had started, innocent, curious, and slowly complicated. She realized now it wasn't just about Ethan or Ryan. It was about something much deeper. She had been searching for validation, for someone to remind her she was still interesting, still worth noticing. And that longing had blinded her to the truth she'd ignored for years. She had stopped noticing herself that night. While Daniel was reading on the couch, Emma sat beside him quietly. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. He looked up from his book. "Always. I've been lost," she said simply. "Not because of anyone else, because of me. I forgot how to live for myself. And in that space, I made mistakes." Daniel set the book down. His eyes were full of concern, but also softness. "Emma, everyone gets lost sometimes. You don't have to explain everything. I've made mistakes too. I thought working harder would make us happier, but it only made us strangers." His words hit her deeply. For years, they had both been drifting parallel lives in the same house. Now, finally, they were facing it. They talked for hours about everything they had ignored. The loneliness, the resentment, the fear of saying the wrong things. It wasn't easy, but it felt like tearing down walls that had been there for too long. When she went to bed that night, Emma didn't feel fixed, but she felt lighter. For the first time, there was hope. Not the reckless kind that came from escaping, but the quiet kind that came from rebuilding. A week later, Ryan called again. She almost didn't answer, but something in her needed closure. "Emma," he said, "I wanted to apologize for how everything happened. I shouldn't have gotten involved in what wasn't mine. I thought I was helping when I told you about Ethan, but maybe I just made things worse." "You told me the truth," she said calmly. "It hurt, but it helped me see things clearly. So, thank you." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, I did care about you. Not in a careless way, but genuinely. You reminded me what real connection feels like." She smiled sadly. Maybe we both needed that reminder. There was silence on the line, and then he said softly, "Take care of yourself, Emma." "You too, Ryan." When she hung up, she realized something had shifted. She didn't feel guilt or confusion anymore. She felt gratitude for what had been, for what had taught her something, and for what she was finally ready to let go. A few days later, Emma received a letter in the mail, no sender's name, just her address written neatly on the envelope. Inside was a short note from Ethan. "Emma, I owe you one last apology, and not just for the lie I told. You've taught me something that connection built on half-truths doesn't last. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I'll always be grateful for the honesty you brought into my life. I hope you find peace, and that you never stop being the woman who feels deeply." Emma folded the letter carefully and put it away in a drawer. She didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet acceptance that some people come into your life not to stay, but to teach you what you need to learn. Months passed. The seasons began to change. Daniel and Emma's relationship slowly grew stronger. Not perfect, but honest. They took walks in the evenings again, laughed at old memories, and found small joys in the simplest routines. One Sunday morning, Daniel surprised her with a trip to the coast. "Just a day away," he said with a grin. "No plans, no schedules." They drove with the windows down, music playing softly, the ocean smell growing stronger as they neared the beach. When they reached the shore, Emma took off her shoes and let the sand press between her toes. The waves rolled in, calm and endless dot. Daniel watched her with a gentle smile. "You look peaceful," he said. "I think I finally am," she replied. He took her hand. "You know, I used to think love was supposed to feel exciting all the time. But now I think it's about showing up every day, even when it's hard." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "That's what I forgot. I kept waiting for something new to make me feel alive. But it was always right here. I just stopped seeing it." They walked together in silence, the sun dipping low in the sky that evening. As they drove home, the car was quiet but comfortable. Emma leaned her head against the window, watching the road blur past. For the first time, she didn't feel torn between choices or haunted by what-ifs. She had finally found peace in the mess of her own story. When they got home, she went to her room and opened her journal, something she hadn't touched in years. On the first blank page, she wrote, "I took a risk and lost pieces of myself. But I also found the truth that love isn't about chasing something new. It's about rediscovering what's real. And maybe that's what growing up really means, not finding perfection, but learning how to choose peace over chaos. She closed the journal and smiled faintly. It felt like the end of a long, stormy season and the beginning of something quieter, more grounded. A few weeks later, Emma ran into Lauren at a cafe. Her friend hadn't seen her in months and was eager to catch up. "You look different," Lauren said, tilting her head. "In a good way." Emma laughed softly. "Maybe I just stopped fighting everything," Lauren grinned. "So what happened to the two guys who turned your world upside down?" Emma thought for a moment. "They were lessons, not mistakes." "Lessons in what?" "In remembering who I am," she said simply. Lauren nodded thoughtfully. "Then I'd say it was worth it." They shared a smile, and Emma realized how much had changed, not just around her, but inside her. She didn't crave attention anymore. She craved peace. Months later, while cleaning out a drawer, Emma found Ethan's letter again. She read it one last time, then placed it back carefully. She didn't need to keep it, but she didn't want to throw it away either. It was a chapter one she had lived, learned from, and closed. That evening, as Daniel came home from work, he found her cooking dinner and humming softly to herself. "You seem happy," he said. "Surprised, I am," she replied, smiling at him. For real this time. He walked over, kissed her forehead, and said, "Then I guess we're both finally home." In the quiet of that moment, Emma realized something profound. Sometimes life breaks us only to rebuild us stronger. Sometimes we lose our way to find our truth. She had walked through guilt, confusion, and heartbreak, but in the end, she had found honesty, forgiveness, and love. Not the movie kind, the real kind. The kind that grows quietly day after day. In the spaces where understanding replaces judgment, she looked out the window at the setting sun and thought to herself, "I took a risk and it broke me, but it also showed me who I really am." And that truth, she knew, was worth everything.